Good evening. This is the Wednesday, August 22nd, 2018 meeting of the Moscow Planning and Zoning Commission. I'd like to call the meeting to order and begin with the approval of the minutes from July 25th.
And I think Ann already has the one I sent him.
Okay, so Victoria submitted some typos, etc., corrections. Anybody else find anything, or do I hear a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Rob. A second?
Second.
Second. Thank you, Victoria. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Correspondence. Is there any correspondence from staff this evening, Mike?
Nothing from staff this evening. No.
Okay. Item 3, the Transportation Commission meeting report. Joel gave us a heads up he was going to be out of town, but I wasn't able to make the meeting. I don't know if anyone else, if we have any update in any other way, but at any rate, I guess we'll move on to item 4, which is public comment, and this is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to us regarding matters that aren't currently pending before us or on our agenda tonight. Is anybody here wanting to speak to us on items of a general nature? Nope. Okay. So we get to item 5. Woo.
We're going back to this Transportation Commission. If you guys want me to go there, I can. I didn't even know that we could do that, or I didn't know that was an option. But I'm interested in that kind of stuff anyway, so I would, if Joel does miss some more, I wouldn't mind.
That would be
going
great.
there.
Yeah, normally it meets, I think, when Historic Preservation meets, right? It's on a,
It's
so,
usually a Thursday. I think
yeah, so we have some conflicts
There's a
there.
lot of stuff going on that we were kind of interested in knowing about. I mean, I
Right.
don't really remember what it was.
Yeah, well, the
Some
smart
stuff coming down the
transit, I know,
pipeline.
was one of their recent issues.
Yeah.
Was, but I don't.
Yeah, if he
I
misses
don't.
again, I'll figure it out when it is, and I'll try to get there.
And I get notifications because I signed up for them, and I get a
Okay.
little
Oh,
behind.
that's
so
why I
didn't-
can do that. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
okay.
So, well, thank you. That'd be great.
No worries.
Well, we can get him to bring us up to speed, I guess, on the next,
All right.
at the next meeting. But that would be great to let him know. Thank you, Dennis. So, item 5, the Urban Berm Edition Final Plat. Mike, has a presentation for that. Then.
Okay. So this is the final plat for the Urban Berm Edition, which was, if you recall, the townhouse development on Public Avenue. So this was the property outlined in red at the center of your screen. Public Avenue running east-west here to the north. A little over 24,000 square feet in size on this property, and then primarily surrounded by single-family, two-family dwellings within this area: Lincoln Street, Vandal Drive, and Garfield Street, and then Peachtree Drive there to the northeast. Just a closer view of this property. As you recall, it kind of sloped off towards Public, so there's quite a bit of topography on this property, and sloped up in this kind of southeasterly direction there, and then leveled off somewhere in the corner over here. But May 9th, the commission conducted a public hearing, and the request was from Tyler George for that parcel, 24,270 square feet in size, located adjacent to Public Avenue. So they proposed 8 townhouse parcels. Those range from 2,700 square feet to 3,600 square feet in size. And the commission ultimately recommended approval of the preliminary plat with just one condition. The developer shall increase the 5-foot easement to an 8-foot easement adjacent to Public Avenue right-of-way, and so that was to account for our most recent street standard that was required on Public Avenue, since that was a collector street. And so, if you recall, there was one issue as far as the right-of-way dedication. There was an additional 5 feet that technically, per city code, they were required to dedicate, and the commission recommended that they match the current section that's already been developed out there. And so that ultimately ended up going to council, and they had a public hearing on June 4th of this year, and they approved it with that waiver to the street standard requirements of dedicating of 5 feet, so that wasn't required. But they did have the same condition that planning and zoning ended up requiring, which was the increase of the easement from 5 to 8 feet. So this is the final plat. As you can see, I think preliminary plat, we had the jog here and the different iterations where it You have the 60-foot right-of-way, and then it jogged to account for a 70-foot right-of-way. So since that was waived, we just got the standard line that extends here to the north. These are the 8 parcels, so those really haven't changed at all in size. And then there's a stormwater detention parcel to collect all the stormwater runoff in that northwest corner. And for parkland dedication, council accepted the fee in lieu of dedication for this subdivision. So staff has reviewed the final plat for conformance with city and state code requirements and found it to be in compliance, and recommends the commission recommend approval to city council.
Thank you. Are there any comments from anybody?
Looks to me like they took care of it, what we wanted, so. I would recommend approval.
Okay, do you want to make, anybody?
I'm making, yeah, I think that's.
If anybody else want to comment first, or, well, okay, thank you, Dennis, go ahead.
I'll make a motion, we approve it, and send it to city council.
Thank you.
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Vote? Okay, thank you. So, item 6, proposed RV park at 603 West Palouse River Drive.
So this is a RV park proposal within an existing mobile home park. Mr. Gary Lester's requesting this. So we have a RV park spaces proposed to be dedicated within Abiel Mobile Home Park, and that's located at 603 West Palouse River Drive. Currently numerous sites within the mobile home park that are really too small to accommodate typical mobile homes these days. That would be more suitable for RV spaces. The applicant purchased the park in 2015. He's currently been in the process of improving it over the years. And then in addition to the spaces that are proposed to be permanently dedicated to RVs, he's got a number of spaces in the park that wishes to have the flexibility of having RVs in temporarily within a 3 to 5 year period, and then ultimately transition those into mobile homes to try to make it more viable with the rehab of the park. So this is the property, Palouse River Drive, running east-west here to the north. Got the current terminus of Sunnyside Avenue with Prospect Place development over here. ITD has a maintenance yard here off of Palouse River Drive to the west of the property. The purple line represents the city limits boundary here to the south. There is an industrial business park, Creco, over here to the southeast. And then this is NRS's current warehouse facility here to the east, as well as a small house that they use for office space for NRS as well. And so this would be the, there's essentially 2 loops for the existing mobile home park. You've got loop 1 here to the east, which loops through in this direction, and then you have loop 2 here to the west that loops around as well. So a little bit of background, this mobile home park's been around a while. I believe it's the 1950s when it was established, and it used to be called Terrace Gardens. Subject property 7.74 acres in size, and then they have 2 parcels, and each of those contain a looped drive. So 93 spaces currently, and they vary between 30 feet in width by 42 to 53 feet in depth, and that's in loop 1, and then 30 feet wide by 50 to 70 feet in depth for loop 2. The zoning in the area is designated as motor business for this property, as well as the properties to the west and to the east, primarily along the highways, and then Palouse River Drive, which is a minor arterial. To the north of Palouse River Drive is multiple family residential. So that's our R4 designation, and then that ends up transitioning into an R3 zone there to the north. And then to the south, outside of city limits and the area of city impact, that's the ag forest zone down here in the gold color. So motor business really just intended to provide for commercial services that are compatible, have similar operation, and then it's mainly based upon motor vehicle based trade. And then the city tries to concentrate those uses in certain areas to maximize convenience and maximize service. And RV parks are permitted within the motor business zone, but they do require review and approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So technically, it's not a public hearing since they are a permitted use, but they just do require a review, and that's within the RV park code by the commission. So this is the site plan that Mr. Lester's submitted. So it shows the width of the roadways, so approximately 30 feet in width. Loop 1 ends up looping around in this direction. It's kind of highlighted all the spaces that are of inadequate size for newer mobile homes, and those are all highlighted in kind of the darker tone there. So there's numerous ones, primarily in the Loop 1, the eastern loop, which is a little bit smaller than the westerly loop, and so that's where I think a lot of those are located, but there are some intermingled within Loop 2 of the development as well. So 93 spaces. There is a communal facility here. I believe that has laundry and some mail and some other services within that building, and some open space that surrounds it. And then Palouse River is down here. South Fork of the Palouse River is down here to the south, and there is a little bit of a floodplain on the southern portion of this property down here. So this is an aerial view. This is from 2012. You can see some spaces in there that are currently empty, some of those pads. And then this is a more recent Google Earth shot, and so you can see this is from 2018 actually, so the applicant's been going through and removing some of those decrepit mobile homes and replacing those, and then leaving pads, and so a lot of these spaces are of inadequate size there to accommodate, and so those are currently vacant and just have the space there, the slab of the proposed RV in those areas. These are just some pictures that are provided as part of your packet. So this is the entrance of one of the loops here. You can see the streets are paved, and they have some curbing on both sides of the street with this within this loop. These are some of the newer mobile homes that the applicants installed in the park, and so these are some new models that have been moved in with some decks established there. And these are just showing some of the smaller pads, and there is appears to be an existing RV park model on one of these pads right now. And this is the other loop. I think this second loop has paving about 30 feet in width, but it doesn't have curbing on either side. And then our RV park code goes through a number of standards. The sizes of RV spaces have to be at least 40 by 20, and then, but we do allow up to 40% of those to be smaller, 25 by 20. The designated RV spaces that the applicant has shown in the site plan are at least 30 feet in width by 42 feet in depth, and those exceed the minimum required by the RV park code. Separation requirement's 10 feet, and that's similar to mobile homes, and so almost all the mobile homes that are placed out there have to meet the 10-foot requirement, and so the pads that were established would already meet the 10-foot requirement, whether or not they're adjacent to RVs or mobile homes on those pads. Sanitary facilities, we require if there are RVs that are not self-contained or tents being provided in a campground, there's supposed to be some type of potable water and toilet facilities provided. The applicant's not proposing to have any of those RVs that are not self-contained or tents in the site, so they're not required to have those. Open space requirement just states that common open space needs to be provided in the park somewhere, and then the size of the open space shall be left to the discretion of the developer. So really not too clear about how large that is or where it needs to be located. There is some open space throughout the park, but probably the largest area has been designated surrounding the mailroom, park office, and the laundry room building, and that was the building I pointed out at the middle of Loop 1. Then refuse, so trash receptacles are required, and then there's a separation distance that can't be further than 150 feet away from any RV or campground space. And the way the applicant's satisfying the refuse requirement here is that roll carts are available for each mobile home or RV, And so they would each have their own personal roll cart for each of the spaces, and so that would meet the distance requirements. And then they're required to have streets, the internal private drives meet a minimum requirement of 28 feet, including 20-foot surface, so asphalt concrete, and a 4-foot shoulder. The shoulder is usually gravel for two-way streets, and then 20 feet, including a 12-foot surface, 4-foot shoulders for one-ways. And the applicant does have one-way streets, so it's only required to have a 20-foot wide private drive through the park. And the applicant has 30 feet in width approximately, so it's usually around 28, 29 feet, close to that 30-foot mark, so it would meet the requirement for the one-way traffic. And then the outside curves have to meet the radius of 40 feet, which they do. And utilities of the park, all RV parks, campgrounds with access to city sewer water shall be served by such. So there's existing water and sewer and electrical that run through the park, and each of those mobile homes has a podium for connection to water and sewer there. So they currently meet that requirement. The length of stay, so we do require that RVs within the city, they can't exceed more than pretty much 6 months out of a calendar year. And so they're able to remain for that period of time, but all the RV spaces would still, there's really no way to waive that. We just have to abide by the 6-month duration annually, and so that would be a requirement that would still be in effect for any of the RV spaces within the park. So there is a portion of the RV park code that says that if the preliminary plans are found to be in substantial compliance with the requirements of the RV park code, the Planning and Zoning Commission may waive the final plan review. And so since it's already a developed mobile home park and pretty much is already developed to our RV park standards, we would recommend that the commission approve the RV park proposal and waive the final plan review. And the applicant's here to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant?
I guess the thinking about sewer, I don't have.
Hold on one second. Also, I forgot. Could you come up to the podium and introduce yourself? Thank you.
Or you
Sorry
sit at
about
the
that.
table. I don't
Oh,
think we
yeah,
have
or sit
that-
at the
yeah, I don't
table.
think we
Yeah.
have that mic
Okay,
hooked
come
up,
join
so.
us at the table.
grab a chair.
But it's for the public record that we need to have you introduce yourself. Yeah.
My name is Gary Lester. I'm the owner of ABL Mobile Home Community. Thank you for entertaining my proposal. I appreciate it. Your question?
Yes, go ahead, Nelson.
I would just, I don't own a RV, so the sewer hookup, I mean, one presumes that there's electrical and sewer for any mobile home that moves in, but does an RV have the same hookup, or do you have to provide, are you providing a
An adapter.
special adapter for RV vehicles?
So there is the sewer at each pad, water and power, and we can provide those. They make like a quick connect thing that you just glue into place on top of what I've got there, and then it allows the RVs to just click on, to kind of click in there. Yep. So we can provide that.
On the one-way coming in on the first loop here, the east loop, since they'd be coming in this way, are there going to be issues getting them back in, or are you going to have them go in front?
You know, they'll pull in just like you're driving in on the one way, and then you can kind of back them into whichever space. There seems to, like I brought those new mobile homes in, they're 48-footers, and the commercial guys had no problem doing that with the 48-footers, so that was good to know. Yeah.
And could I ask one other question? This is probably one more for Mike. In the 180-day rule, I could envision a facility like this being attractive to somebody that wanted to be here on a longer-term basis over the 180 days. If there was a vacant space, would they be within compliance if they just moved to a new space?
No, I mean, it specifies that within each park, essentially,
each
that
park.
you're given.
So you
yeah,
can't go from
six
loop one to
months.
loop two.
Yeah.
Every day on a 6 months, just rotate one space.
And is that, Mike, do you know what the intent is behind that? Is it,
I think the intent was just to prohibit more permanent housing within RVs in the city.
that's, you know, that.
I mean, usually they're not for permanent residents, they're usually for recreating at a certain,
Right.
a certain period of time, and then you leave, not to be there for, years. So that's really the intention
You
of that.
wonder what a small manufactured home, a tiny manufactured home and a large RV, I don't know what the difference is in terms of just accommodating. I suspect that some of the smaller homes might not be any more livable than some of those humongous RVs. Huh?
Newer RVs are
More expensive.
Pretty
right?
more expensive. Yeah, well, so I'm just, it's kind of, I kind of see what the rule is. On the other hand, I'm not sure that I get the full point of there must be other costs in having a permanent. Is there a
Well, they're
big
actually-
cost differential? In other words, is it a lot cheaper to be in an RV home for over 6 months than a
I think it's month to month, is the same rate. The county doesn't have a 6-month stay on theirs. So, so I don't know if the city at some point would go that direction or not, but I know there's people that, I turn RVs away all the time, and people are looking, hey, I'm going to school, I want to stay in an RV. So there's a demand for that, the way it's written now, it's a 6-month max, so we would just write our leases with that it would be a 6-month maximum, and then I'd probably work out a deal with the guy east of town and swap some people back and forth.
So Kurt and then Mike. Yeah.
Yeah, most of my questions have just been answered, but I was thinking we might want to revisit that 6-month limit sometime, because it's kind of one answer that's going on to housing affordability. I mean, people would rather be in an RV than be homeless, so.
Well, over the years, you see a lot of like the mobile homes and the RVs and the hybrids between the two. Like they had they still do the park model RVs. And I think that was probably the one picture you had, I think was a park model. But, it even went to the point where the state Division of Building Safety was making a formal determination. Actually, I think it was just this last legislative session. They ended up trying to define a park model more and just saying that it's not a mobile home. Because you had a lot of these that was the reason I think they call it a park model, is because you put it in a mobile home park.
Yeah.
And so, but they were prohibited by state law, and that was a lot of it's just confusing because they're called a park model, so people just assume they can put it in a mobile home park, and it looks, it's a little bit larger, more towards a mobile home. And so, yeah, you end up with kind of this hybrid where mobile homes you're allowing permanently, and then RVs you're restricting to the 6 month.
Yeah. Well, is a 6-month a state guidance?
No,
Or
it's
if the county doesn't have it, it must not be state.
It's a city law, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mike?
Well, I was just going to comment, you run into that limiting factor in a lot of campgrounds, that you'll have a week or a 2-week or a 3-month. I know a lot of people utilize these as 6 months are construction guys, people that are traveling around and part of big jobs and are looking someplace to put that in, and those kind of things I very understand. The one concern I have is somebody bringing in an old $800 tandem axle travel trailer that has no insulation in it, and it freezes up and it becomes a real detriment to you, Gary, in your operation.
Yeah.
You can administer and watch that and keep
Yeah.
it from happening.
Yep.
And so you kind of got to weigh that. Is this somebody coming in here and gonna try and live as long as I can live in this old building or what?
Yeah.
But I understand, I was just sitting here reading this going, what an opportunity for the mini home complex that we've talked about, but you don't have that ability to move and go to the next job and,
Well, it's kind of ironic that mobile homes, in a sense, usually are immobile because they go onto a site and they never move.
Time
And
runs, walk 'em up,
RVs
take
are the
axles
ultimate
off.
moving machine. I mean, they're much more mobile, so maybe,
Absolutely.
yeah. But anyway,
And things have, the construction of the RVs are a lot more durable now and compared to some of those older, real camper trailer kind of things, right? So I think they're much more suitable for longer term for those who choose to do that. A lot of retirees do it all the time.
right, they sell
It's all
out
they live
and
in. Yeah.
hit the road.
Yeah. So, year round.
Yeah, yes, so it's like the problem you'd want to avoid is a potential syringa of RVs.
Right,
But at the same time, it'd be nice to figure out some kind of flexibility where people could, it's not just this simple arbitrary 6 months.
should there be
And
some
that's,
sort of standard just in the construction of the RV potentially for longer term? I mean, if we started to look at.
6 months is sounding better and better to me now.
Is there any mechanism that the city has to check that?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, right, that's more,
I mean,
Well,
I don't think they have an RV officer running around.
Right.
that's what I'm
You know, I
saying.
mean,
They will when I get this done.
Well, I meant
It just becomes an enforcement issue.
Yeah, more
And
and more
I mean,
and
and a lot of times for us, we don't have the staff to go around and check on it, so it's usually complaint basis. But, usually it's a little easier to track if mobile homes, we know, because they get a set permit, and so we know when it comes in.
Right.
RVs will just come in and they're not required to get anything. So, we really don't know when they come and go, and so it just becomes an enforcement issue, but, it's not something that would be top priority to keep track of.
Well, and my understanding from reading your material is that you're really trying to use it as almost a fundraising opportunity to help finance more permanent accommodation of
Yeah, the trailer.
of,
get trailers in there.
mobile homes. So you're looking more at permanent settlement anyway.
Yeah,
So-
there'll be several spaces in there that are just gonna, long term, they're just too short to hold a mobile home. But if I get these spaces rented out, each year I can pay off a new trailer model and put another one in and just keep laddering them in. And I get better appraisal value on my mobile home park with mobile homes in place than I do RVs.
Yeah.
So it's better for me too.
So maybe we should rethink this. Okay, any more discussion on this?
And Gary was thinking at one point of looking at tiny homes too, as,
Oh.
as part of this.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I get requests for those, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to have to talk to the city about that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm open to them, anything I can do to fill those spaces, but I get requests, and I say I'm not, right now I don't have the permission to do that, so.
I can give you some contact information for somebody who does a lot of that in the south after Katrina, but then has kept doing it in a number of places. So,
Cool.
Yeah. So, anyway, are there any other comments, or are we ready to approve a recommend? We need to make a recommendation that city council.
It just goes to us to review.
Oh,
It's
okay.
just the commission review.
Oh,
So
okay, okay.
You could have the chance to approve it tonight.
Okay.
If you-
I should go back and read what action is necessary.
we waive the final plan,
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
Approve it without a final review.
make a motion that we approve it without a final plan
second.
review. Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming.
I'd like to say that I'm glad to see someone's really putting some effort into this.
Thank you, and it is a lot of effort. It's important I bargained for it, but I can
right.
see a good thing.
You can take
coming
on
out of it.
Syringa next.
Maybe once.
The debate. I mean,
That's it, the reward for a job well done is another job.
Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks, Gary.
So our final item is goal setting, and the goal setting is not general so much as really focused on what we have been calling shared readings, but we're thinking of switching to calling continuing education. So The history that I've been able to decipher from talking to people, Deb Reynolds told me that there used to be a commissioner's magazine, and probably you were on the commission when that, I wasn't on it when it, and they stopped publishing it, and it had articles of interest specifically to commissioners. They stopped publishing it, so then Nils, when he became chair, and we didn't have access to it when I came on the commission. Nils implemented my shared readings program idea, and we've done that for a few years. And Rob, so I was thinking that maybe we had sort of run its course for a while because, but anyway. And Rob sort of shook me awake again on it, and we met a few times, and we've met with Mike, just kind of trying to envision what it might be in terms of more of a continuing education program. So it's not so much always reading; it could be many other forms. So I think tonight we want to look at two areas. One is in order to educate ourselves to be more effective commissioners and to keep staying current with issues. What topics do we need to address? And that's what we're going to address first in brainstorming and asking people. And then second, and I've done a little more thinking on this other issue, is what venues do we have to get information on those topics? You know, what's a variety of delivery methods or whatever. So one of the things I think so Rob's going to take your ideas, and I know Victoria has some, I know I have some, I know Rob probably has some, Mike probably has some, of topics. And I might start it off just from our discussion with Mike the other day that we're soon going to be looking at our subdivision ordinance, and rethinking that, and so getting some more current thinking on what subdivisions are in other places and what the implications might mean for that. I think is so I'll offer that one as a starter. So, you want to just go around the table?
No.
Or do you want to just push them out there? Okay, Kurt.
Push one out there. So I like kind of failure studies, and because it can be very educational, and I think
Forensics, huh?
yeah, unless we're perfect, I bet there are some in our files.
So you're pointing at me as the.
So failure study. So could you be a failure in what?
Well, there must be some things in there that are planning and zoning decisions that, in retrospect, were not really particularly good decisions.
Oh, so of this commission or just in general?
City of Moscow,
Okay.
you know, and
That has to predate 2013.
yeah, no problems there. Let's see, let me check when I came on.
Then we can blame you and Jill and Nelson. No, I'm just kidding. Okay.
But whether or not it's worth the time, I mean, Mike would be the person to kind of look through and see if he can spot any kind of flagged problematical cases that came up, and probably be nice to anonymize them.
I remember Joel talking about, and not specifics, but he talked about controversial meetings that the council had, or the commission had gone through, and maybe there would be some topics out of that we can, I like the idea, that's
Yeah, that's going to be yeah, maybe tangential to that, because it's come up a number of times. Deb Reynolds used to bring it up, and it came up a few meetings ago, is we have these public hearings, it's a sort of formal setting, and we have the problem of the public maybe resisting what our decision is or not being happy with our decision, and we feel pretty comfortable that we're acting within the intent of the comprehensive plan, and so there's this disconnect.
Yeah.
And how do you bridge that disconnect with some form of communication to the public about? And I've sort of been thinking about communication as a public communication as being an important issue for us, but I don't. So I don't know. Because it would prevent failures.
I
Yeah.
get what you mean.
Yeah.
And I wondered about that, but we may run into legal problems with that if it's, A lot of times, by the time the public hearing comes around, a
It's
whole
too-
lot of the work has already been done.
Right.
And if it's possible to have some more informal meeting before you go into the public hearing, but to sort of a more freewheeling thing to answer people's questions, but yeah, my guess is
Well,
the city lawyer would have some.
And
something
that's
to
what
say
we
about
tried
that.
to achieve with the neighborhood
neighborhood
meeting.
meetings.
Yeah.
Has there been any discussion about expanding the surrounding area for those? Because it's 600 feet right now. Has anyone talked about that recently?
Well, we double it up already, so 300 feet is what's required by state law, so we double that. But, not that I'm aware of.
So that's like a block and well, it's about a block and a half, basically in every direction of a normal city block, or 'cause our blocks are 3-something
I
usually.
think the maximum size of our city blocks is dictated at 600 feet. So
Okay.
I think we're somewhere around 300, so
Yeah,
it's usually.
it is, yeah, when
usually
I've
two
measured.
two blocks
some-
in either direction, maybe a little more
Right.
depending upon, because we draw a
Right.
radius with GIS in order to do that.
One of the other things that we had talked about as we're thinking, because I think that there could be a tendency to get a lot more subjects than we can get through, but trying to not do this every meeting or every other meeting, more of a
Oh, yeah.
quarterly
I forgot about
kind of
that,
a
yeah.
thing, so that we don't overwhelm ourselves by trying to do some of the educating ourselves or having conversations about this. But, yeah, so that, I just kind of throw that into the mix, that would kind of look at that kind of a time frame. And if anybody's got other ideas about it, too. And we're not going to let anybody off the hook. Everybody's got to come up with something.
Yeah, yeah, so here we go, so yeah. All right, anybody else?
Well, one of the issues that you struggle with in planning and zoning is trying to decide where we, how to encourage good planning or good development. And Legacy Crossing is the one of the major issues in my in my world, and we've worked on it hard for a long time, and the city really went whole hog on it and really did I thought a really good job. But the dilemma is, as we edge toward development, then, do we just make some rule and then just wonder how anything could happen? And where we get into an issue is where how can we be more proactive, I guess, in terms of
How can we do more of the
development in our
planning
own-
part
At
instead?
what point can we? How far can we go, or should we go as commissioners, as planning commissioners, to encourage some kind of development? And Legacy Crossing is one of those places, but it's just hard to know if there's a way to make things happen. What I'm looking at right now, I'm looking at Lewiston, and I'm thinking about Joel down there in Lewiston you saw it in the newspaper today. I mean, the future of Lewiston is just sitting there aching to happen along the river. And they've got all this kind of a strange, unused territory, and they haven't figured out how to make downtown. They've just done the normal thing. Well, go out to the strip and build a drive-in and blah, blah, blah. And yet I see the planning and zoning in Lewiston, led, I think, by Joel Plaskone, trying really hard. We just talked about this at a little planning
Right,
meeting
right.
the other day.
Right,
We were both at it. And so that's the thing that attracts me, is how to I mean, Joel's sounding like a cheerleader, you know, for this development, not just okay, let's put up some obstructions to development and see if people can get over them.
Maybe it's
As
how do we
opposed to-
challenge developers to kind of do more progressive?
Well, and make
models
it known
of development.
what we think possibilities are. You know, as we worked on the last comp plan, some people made fun of it, but Walter struggled with the ring road idea as could the ring road concept encourage some new thought about how growth happens in Moscow? I think in some small ways it did, but it also made people it freaked them out because the minute you start to grow, you get out past the edge of town. And, you know, part of the reason that I like Legacy Crossing so much is we don't have to deal with the edge of town issue. Like the people who've been hearing meadowlarks for 20 years and are really angry because somebody's going to build a subdivision in their meadowlark park. And so, you know, those are issues that I just don't know how to put words to what we could do as being just a little bit more insightful and proactive as a planning group. I realize as a zoning group, we don't have that ability. It's that planning arm that allows us perhaps to encourage things, but I'm never sure how to make that, how to get on that soapbox. Anyway, it's a challenge for us, and when we were, I mean, Legacy Crossing now has taken a kind of a hit. We thought the restaurant folks we're anxious to see something happen in that area, and so far we're not seeing too much.
Well, we aren't really in a position to. It's the economics of the situation that's going to drive development,
Sure,
not
sure.
us.
No, I understand that.
It's and
But
so
that's why I bring up Joel,
Yeah.
because if you haven't been paying attention
Right.
to him,
Right.
you could
Right.
just read it in the newspaper today.
Right. And maybe it would
I don't know how
spark an
many take
idea,
the Lewiston
yeah,
paper, but
yeah.
I happen to take the Lewiston
Yeah,
paper. And
yeah.
so, you know, you can just say, wow, the Planning and Zoning Commission is struggling to say something about how Lewiston might develop. And that's an issue. If you didn't see it, I'd be happy to bring it next time and bring copies for people. But it reminded me of there's a more proactive sense about Joel the planner, and I'm just using him as an example. I don't want to make fun of Michael right here in front of here.
Yeah,
at
we've
our
already
table.
asked him to tell us what his failure.
Well, I think in some ways you're right. Over the years between Bill and Mike, the Legacy Crossing became, it's our opportunity maybe in an area that has some synergy between downtown and campus, and it's sort of a nexus. And for Lewiston, it's the river. We don't have a natural feature like that, but we have that opportunity, and I think they've done a good job of trying to set up the opportunity. But it's somebody's got to have the vision to come in and do it, and the bucks.
I suppose it's
Yeah.
we can make we can throw the ball to you and say, oh, can city council be more of a cheerleader than we can be? I don't know whether that's whether that's really the case or not, but how to
Well, the group that's working with Legacy Crossing is the Urban Renewal Agency. And we had mentioned before having someone come in and talk to us about Legacy Crossing again, because we have new people and it's been a while. And I think that's already being thought about, between you and Bill. That's a natural partner right there.
Sure, of course it is.
And that would be a really worthwhile synergy to have them come in and speak with us about Legacy Crossing and what they're doing and those types of things.
That should be part of, the
continuing education.
Yeah, we'll get into, I think, strategies in a minute of venues to kind of do this, but in terms of topics.
Well, we've already picked on Mike and Ann.
No. In terms of topics, the other thing, I think of elements in our comprehensive plan rewrite, or not rewrite, but update, and we had some injection from other commissions, kind of where you're leading. I think that, possibly we can invite some of those commissions to talk to us about strategies. But one of the big ones that I remember is the whole climate change or adapting to it section. That could be a topic of how are communities lining up to prepare for that. And I think, in our case, we've talked about water being one of those issues, but the other is, what are the strategies to deal with maybe more increasing smoke every summer, and the effects of fire? Are there, what planning opportunities or development opportunities are there to help mitigate some of that? But really more, I guess I'd rather hear from in this case, the Sustainability Commission on what they really mean by the words that are in our comprehensive plan that they want to see evolve into strategies, and how do we educate ourselves about them. And that's just one element of the comprehensive plan, but there's probably others. That's just one that comes back to my brain right now. But do you know what I'm talking about? Okay. Anyway, so I'll shut up because I want other people to talk.
We haven't heard from this side of the table.
I think you guys are covering it all. I mean, that's a lot.
That's a lot right
Well,
there.
that does become, and it may be that this is going to be an iterative process where we
Yeah.
pick some ideas, get started with the process, figure out our
Yeah.
strategies, and then come back and
Fine
revisit it
tweak.
to see if we'd like to add some other
Well,
topics.
hopefully
there's-
this is just a menu
Yeah,
that we can
Start.
pick from.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
do we have parking on there yet?
Yeah, because we've got to do parking.
And that's what I would say is
We got to do parking, and we
That's
got to
like the big
do,
one.
we
Yeah.
got to do
That's the big
affordable
one.
housing, because council's looking at
Affordable, yeah,
affordable housing, and they're
affordable
looking at
housing.
parking. And everybody is looking at.
Oh, and their short-term rentals, is that on your radar at all?
Yeah, next upcoming.
Won't be able to read my writing that time.
Because it came up tonight with
Yeah.
the RV, and you want affordable housing, but you also don't want to take away the temporary housing that the construction guy is going to need for 6 months. You can't steal from Peter to, pay Paul. You got to come up with something that answers everybody this month.
Yeah. Yes, Mike?
Just a question on my part. We've talked about planning and being more proactive. I, to this point, still don't know what the planning portion of my commissionership is in planning and zoning. Where do we enter into the planning? When the subdivision comes up, when they come to us and ask for some changes or some adaptations to be made, then that becomes more of a zoning, and at the finality of it all, every one of those topics, where does our planning by legality, by law, allow us to get involved in these things? Subdivisions, failure studies, public communications, limit to P&Z and development. They're all wonderful things, but at what point can we, as the P&Z, get involved and not step on anybody's toes? I don't mind ruffling some feathers.
So, where we got involved with, when I was in the audience, I wasn't up here, with the accessory dwellings was where you sat down and you figured out how tall could they be, what were the setbacks, what were the percentages of permeable ground, how they, what
Where we're
size
making
were
new
they,
ground,
who-
in a sense.
Yeah,
Right.
and so all that stuff was very, very in-depth studied and made decisions.
Or
on how to
integration.
Set that up.
I was thinking when I first came on, it was urban agriculture, allowing small farms to be inside Moscow, and we were looking at, that's a great example what you just gave, but it just new ordinances where, we're not trying to enforce, regulate something, like, it's not a regulatory, it's an aspirational sort of point where you start to think about the issues, you bring the stakeholders to the table to get informed as part of the process, and then you develop an ordinance, or Mike does it, and we tweak it. And, you could probably describe it better than I could, but
Comprehensive plan too, is redoing the comprehensive plan.
Yep.
right, exactly, yeah.
That's really a catalyst for what Nels is talking
Mike, I
about.
would just say, you have to be around for a while. You don't get to come to planning and zoning and in 6 months wonder what happened to the planning element, because every several years we really intensely work on the comp plan. And then we'll, for instance, if you go back, signage was a big deal. So we'd have committees and planning issues and talk to people and come up with a planning document that worked for the city. So that was one. The big box concept. Well, how are we going to deal with big boxes? Well, that was really difficult and exciting, and I had a chance to. So there's another topic that we did.
Well,
accessory
parking
dwelling,
standards
as,
for parking
Victoria
lots
said.
too, landscaping for
Yeah,
it.
landscaping
We
for
actually
parking
had a
lots.
sidebar committee that involved citizens and business owners, and then came back to the commission, and then it was a broader discussion. So that's how we do planning.
Yeah,
And that's
and
the
I
fun
under-
part of our job, honestly.
And I understand that, and I have no problem with that. And I will come in at 6 months and ask this question, whether I can or can't. Because that was what they put me on here, was to ask these questions and find out and learn. But back to your statement, where can we get involved to get a direction headed? Legacy Crossing, you guys are very involved with it. We got subdivisions that are gonna be coming up. Are we gonna get involved with them now? That was all I was in reference to, was being proactive
Right.
instead of reactive.
Right.
And I have not been on here 6 months, but I'll guarantee I'm gonna keep asking questions.
Well, you're right. By the time something comes through the process to us in a public hearing, we're in a judicial capacity. We're not in an ability to make new rules.
Absolutely.
And so our opportunities for that are as we're envisioning new ordinances, we're modifying the comprehensive plan, or, any of those arenas.
Well, and a lot of that being proactive is like the subdivision ordinance that we'll take a look at is, over the years, what we've had happen is that, we've had a subdivision proposal, and then we end up being reactive at the commission level or the council level, and that maybe there's cul-de-sacs and there's no pedestrian connections, and so, all those, the way we insert ourselves into those subdivisions are making conditions of approval. They have to extend a street stub so that the next vacant piece of, the 40 acres adjacent is able to connect and is able to have utilities extended to their property. And so I think the subdivision ordinance, looking at codifying a lot of those things that maybe in the past we've had some contention and had to have conditions placed upon, these, and maybe the developer didn't know this on the onset and had to work through the public hearing process in order to be able to achieve those. And I think that that's a good opportunity to, look at the subdivision code and some things that we want done there and implement those. And so when we do get subdivisions, right off the bat, maybe it's something that, meets our code and is something that we would, we want, so.
Yeah, and speaking of, and I don't have it really clear in mind, but speaking of failures, as I recall, has been brought up at other meetings, that there was a development and they did not do the street sidewalk improvements, and so the city got stuck. They went bankrupt, they left town, something. I don't remember all the details. I sit in the audience, I don't remember all the stuff. But, and so the city wound up having to pick up that tab, and so now we have developers, they're required to put all those infrastructure things in up front, and if it's something that has to be delayed, they're required to put enough money in there, not a little tiny bit. Which brings up another thing, which is payment in lieu that's come up
Oh, for parks.
for parks, and apparently there's something on
inadequate
parking
fee.
too, but they're totally
Might be.
inadequate fee
Yeah.
for parks, for payment in lieu.
I have a small update on that, which is that I brought it up to the Parks and Rec director, and there's been a conversation with myself, the city supervisor, and the city attorney, and I'm trying to bring it to council, because they're worried about litigation, but they haven't addressed it, as you all know, in over a decade. And so what I'm proposing is there's some middle ground where we're not looking at this for tens of years, but we're also not putting ourselves at risk. And so that conversation hasn't progressed much, but I'm still pushing it. So I'm definitely trying to keep it on folks' radar and to get it in front of the entire council, so it's not myself and staff.
But again, that's embedded within the subdivision ordinance, how much parkland you have to dedicate, right? Isn't it?
Well, the parkland, the amount's there, but not the fee
But not the
in
fee.
lieu.
Right, okay, yeah, true. So,
One idea that I have in regards to your process is I wonder if you ever revisit things that you've decided about. And I think ADUs is a really good example in terms of not revisiting it to maybe change it, but just seeing how many have been built and looking at whether or not you think it's effective based on that.
well, you gave us an update on the ADUs at one point. But that's a good idea. I'm just trying to think.
Yeah.
That we have done once or twice. Not many have been built, actually, or when we've
Well, I
asked.
mean, a half a dozen or so.
Yeah.
We've had some recently.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we talked about kind of some of the impediments to those, and
Yeah.
we had, a requirement that they have to meet the minimum lot size. Not necessarily the minimum lot width, but the minimum lot size in order to have one.
Right.
I know that just in our experience of people contacting our office, I know there's been a handful of those that haven't met the minimum lot size, that were a single-family dwelling. And I think that, looking back on that, you have a lot of those that are, the reason they don't meet the minimum lot size is that they're around the core of town, because they're older lots where, no new lot in a new subdivision is not going to meet the minimum lot size because it's been approved as part of our, subdivision process. But the ones that are 100 years old and, 80 years old, you have a lot of those lots that are maybe 5 zoning codes ago, or maybe they were platted prior to the zoning code. So I think those are the areas that we're trying to promote infill development anyway. And so that, that was a main impediment that I think we identified was, maybe the minimum lot size needs to go away, and it's just if you have a
And
single
other
family
restrictions, because
dwelling.
I'm thinking my neighbor right now, right across the alley, has an historic outbuilding that they're converting into an ADU, and it's right on the alley. I mean, it's certainly wouldn't meet current setbacks, but somehow, I think it's great. I'm excited about it, actually. I think it's a really nice repurposing of a building that, will, without,
Yeah,
but I don't know.
It's because it's in an existing building and it's 5 feet away, so it's just
Yeah.
non-conforming. And so,
Right.
before, we had really strict restrictions on non-conforming structures about what you could, as far as expansion and everything. They're really not changing much of that other than
Right.
internally putting
Right.
the ADU in there.
Right,
So,
right, no, it's great. yeah.
And ADUs are accessory.
Right. And it's a real logical
yeah.
use in the older parts
The
of
use right
town.
now is accessory, and so it's
Yeah.
a like for a like,
Right,
and so they're allowed to do that because the
Right.
setbacks
Oh,
don't change.
Yeah, I wasn't
So-
sure how they were able to get it done, but I think it's great that they're doing it, so.
Yeah.
But,
And I think that's a prime example, but I think, I know how much work you all put into making those decisions, and maybe you want to revisit them periodically, and every
idea.
2 years you have a decision
Yeah.
you make. And
So that's a good idea, but I would also caution that you've developed the ADUs, and I think you did a great job with it. Sitting in the audience, watching you and following you do it all along. You don't just come along now and make it something else. If you want something else, you make something else. If you want a tiny home, you make a tiny home. You don't take your ADU. and
well,
turn
if
it into
if our
something
goal
else.
was to try to encourage them, then we might want to revisit, we might want to look at the statistics of how many are being
Yeah,
built.
and there might need to be some
what the
tweaking.
impediments have been, you know, I think it's mostly economic.
But you knew going in that that was
Yeah.
a more expensive option
Right.
that appealed to a certain client. And
exactly.
that you weren't going to have a rash of ADUs.
Right, we were going to have, yeah. So,
So if we do this once a quarter, we've got about 2.5 years worth.
Yeah, when's your renewal up? You gotta sign on again. Well, maybe, do we have enough for now? And we and then we just kind of look at, I guess I would say, looking at venues, and I have a few to discuss because I've been thinking of, to suggest, because I've been thinking about this for a couple weeks here. And here, one is I looked into, well, first of all, Mike has a really nice APA article system that you get through your membership, right? So
Yeah.
you could just kind of maybe, do you want to talk about those a second?
A few of those now. Yeah, we just get these, I thought it was more quarterly, but I think they put them out every month. And they're short articles.
yeah, sorry.
It's usually more intended for the practicing planner, or I think even, it has a lot of things that a planning and zoning commission would have some value in, and, they kind of have these broader questions they ask at the end that kind of cover the key topics, but usually they're covering topics that are new and prevalent that a lot of other places are looking at, and they're short. They're 5-6 pages, and they're usually have some good statistics in there, and we've found them to be pretty valuable.
So how do we access them?
Well, I could scan them and send them out, or post them to the shared readings. I don't think that, we pay for this service, so we
Right.
pay for the articles. And so I don't think that we'd have an issue, maybe posting them to the shared reading website. They do come out every month, and so I don't know that we need to post every one of them, but ones that, maybe is something we're going to talk about or looking at. But, a lot of them are things we've
Yeah.
talked about before: tiny homes, form-based code.
Right.
Parking.
And some are,
Right.
creative signs,
Right.
that's, an odd one, but it's, maybe worthwhile to take a look and review. They're nice because they're small, and then you can pretty easily kind of review your ordinance and see, if you think there's something that needs to be changed or looked at. It just gives you some good ideas, and so I thought they've been, pretty good. They
Yeah.
have some good graphics and
They look
pictures
good.
in there,
Yeah.
so.
One of the things that I would like to suggest in that regard is that if we find an issue that's got topics that are relevant, we'd like to get it out, and we know that we're either going to be working on the issue or we'd like to talk about it, let's not do it with the shared readings piece of it. Let's get it out to us, either electronically, if you could scan it, or have Ann make a copy and mail it out with the package so that it's in our hands, rather than waiting for us to, oh gosh,
Sure.
I forgot to go out on.
Yeah.
A little bit more active delivery if we
Okay.
could.
All right.
I think that'd be useful for us, but I would also post it so the public could see.
I agree with that.
No, yeah.
From a process point of view, nothing wrong with the concept that we've done some readings, except lethargy gets in the way.
It does, yeah.
And in my mind, one of the things that we might do would, as we take up some of these topics, is find a couple people on the commission that, I'll point at Dennis here and say, okay, if he's interested in parking, he gets somebody else, we get two people, and rather than just say, oh, read this, let's sign ourselves for an hour or an hour and a half at a meeting and have somebody on the commission lead the discussion, and not just all come and say, yeah, I read it, yeah, it's pretty good reading. And because I fall into that, I've been around this for a long, long time, and I think that if we would be more engaged if we would assign ourselves, and this only happens maybe once every 2 years for any person. We're not going to be doing this every month. I agree with you, Rob, that we don't want to kill ourselves off with acting like every month we
Right.
have to do some big training issue.
Yeah.
But if we do something, let's just take the parking issue. Okay, you and somebody get together and as a subcommittee and put together some material, do a PowerPoint and whatever, and put a little bit of enthusiasm and energy into it, and then have the discussion. And the readings are part of the deal too, but now we got somebody saying, okay, here is where I see, but there are parking issues in this part of town that are really suck, and over here, this works pretty well, and with some things, and now we get more involved in the discussion of it, rather than just hoping everybody is being really wonderful students.
Well, there might
and
be
reading.
some, some topics that commission members might have expertise who could do presentations already. I was thinking of form-based codes and design guidelines in historic districts, or, if we're looking at them for downtown. But I was also thinking we could invite chairs of other commissions. So if we were going to talk about parking, we should have somebody from transportation
Sure.
besides
Yes.
Joel.
I like
And we
that,
should
too.
have a discussion, and then maybe one or two of our commission agrees to kind of research. I mean, we had a bunch of articles that I pulled together a few weeks ago that kind of went flat in our in our discussion, but the thinking seems to have shifted more to parking management rather than increased capacity by building more parking. It's more, manage it differently. But anyway, and then also we could have it sort of lines up with what you're talking about, topic-based discussions where we know what the topic's going to be and people find their own articles or information to bring into it. But I'm also thinking we need some, maybe we pay the $300 or we do some YouTubes or something where we watch them together, It costs $300 to access an APA video on different topics for groups, and I went through their current list and saw two that were kind of interesting. One was supporting small business through zoning, whatever that means. I have no idea what it really means, but it sounded interesting. And the other was tiny houses. So that maybe we have a budget of some sort to do an occasional,
Yeah, I
maybe
think
once
a
a
lot
year.
through Idaho APA. I think we get a lot of those videos and trainings for free, so.
Oh,
I
okay,
can check
yeah.
into that.
So the thing is, we'd have to find out how long it is and at least either show it in segments or look at part of it and then use it. Then we're all a captive audience watching it together and reacting to it kind of with a discussion afterwards. And
once again, I think, I go back, Bill Lambert and I became best friends years ago when we were sharing on P&Z, and we did some stuff with new urbanist issues. And so I brought in some videos, and then we shared it with everybody. And once again, rather than just coming in and look at it, assign a couple of people most interested on the commission to pre-watch the
Right,
video,
sure, yeah.
so that we develop some discussion points. Because nothing like having a little argument about, well, I think it ought to be this way, trees ought to be here, it ought to be this way. And then you, because our only education of the public tends to be when their ox is being gored and they're not really in an educational mentality.
Receptive mode, yeah.
They come, they're angry,
Yeah.
and 15 or 60 people come in and they're angry, and then they wonder why we don't listen to them, because that's not the day that they want to get educated. They wanted to educate us typically, and it usually, and oftentimes people go away a little bit discouraged because they think, well, democracy isn't working because you should. I went to one meeting in 10 years and I was a failure. the council didn't listen to me. And
So,
that's,
I like better the idea of inviting commissioners, to the chairs or someone to come in, because you want to talk about affordable housing commission is working on that.
They're lensed in on
They're
it, yeah.
lens- they're gonna have
Yeah,
PowerPoints,
I
they're
agree.
gonna have a focus. And personally, I don't want to be assigned a whole lot of homework here, thank you, I don't want to be a teacher. You know, I've been through school, and I don't necessarily want somebody to say, here, you're gonna do this,
you
go
don't
find
have
people.
to, but I want to be a teacher.
But we also don't need to reinvent the wheel or have our wheel going contrary to another wheel. We want to collaborate. And you've got other commissions out there who are doing some of these topics, so work with them.
So
them
we
come
have
in.
topic-based discussion. We invite any relevant commission to a representative, preferably the chair of that commission, to join the discussion. And we either find a video, or I mean, maybe between Rob and I and Mike, we can find videos or YouTubes or something that people can look at, or somebody on the commission can take, who has an interest, can take the initiative, but we don't have to say, this month you're gonna take care of parking.
Well, I
So
don't think there'd ever be an assignment, Victoria, that wouldn't be my point. I'd say that'd be a volunteer. If somebody isn't interested in volunteering, yeah, being assigned is not a good deal.
Right. Well, I mean, you know, one thing I didn't put,
When Fred influence people.
yeah.
See, you're leaving
Getting
the
a reward
commission
for a
in
job
droves.
not well done.
A promotion.
Yeah.
So,
Might I
Yeah,
make
yeah,
one
yeah,
last
yeah.
little suggestion? That
Absolutely.
maybe on our way out, we could put a hash mark
oh, yeah,
of the top 4.
approval voting or whatever, yeah.
Oh, just, everybody go up and put a hash mark.
Yeah, we
on the
talked
4
about
most
doing
important
dot
ones.
stickers,
Yeah,
but
we
we
were-
didn't,
yeah,
that we didn't do it. We decided we didn't need it, but
Need little dots. Yeah, we need Bill McLaughlin. Where's Bill McLaughlin when we need him?
you know, on topics, I also think we need form-based codes, and I didn't mention that, but,
And you're gonna have to define that.
I can.
well, instead, our regulatory end of things, our land use, we go by land use designation as a way to shape development. So here you can build within an R4 zone with these restrictions. Here it's R3. A form-based is more in the building types themselves and the scale of the building. So does it really matter if somebody's using a building that's of similar scale and scope right next to you for a different use than what you have? Does that make sense? So it's kind of complex, but that's basically, I think, what probably the regulations for Legacy Crossing come the closest to being form-based, but they're not really. I don't know, can you think of examples locally where we have some form-based? A lot of communities have gone to it, they start with an analysis of what's out there, what shapes, what's the scale of that neighborhood, what's the scale of this neighborhood, what's appropriate for those neighborhoods, not what use or, I don't know.
It more dictates the form of the development
yeah.
and the buildings that get built instead of necessarily what uses go in them.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm kind of wondering, as we get this process started, and I like the idea, Kurt Scott will mark some stuff up here, but if we start off with a topic or a subject that we know that we're going to be dealing with, and it's the subdivisions that comes to mind, then we're starting to study something that's relevant to a task that we're going to have
I agree.
coming on, and so that's just kind of my 2 cents worth
Yeah, no.
on that. But I mean, every one of these, I think we've got some pretty relevant topics up there.
So I would ask Ann, being on city council, what's up there that the council is looking at?
Or what could you add to it that the council's looking at that we haven't thought about, too?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be another question.
So, I think there's 2 ways to answer that question. There's me as an individual counselor, but then as far as the entire council goes, I'm just looking at that and thinking what aligns with what are called our challenge areas.
Mm-hmm.
But the challenge with those, we're planning on revisiting them. So we moved away from a annual goal-based strategy to a more strategic plan year to year, and so as far as what fits into that, the one that stands out is actually the form-based one. So we had a presentation recently where we talked about that, but it was barely touched on, and I think that's something that might be of interest to the council as a whole. Parking, definitely, I would say, is something that we've been discussing. And there are a few of us who would like to advocate for a comprehensive parking study. But we haven't advanced that discussion.
Comprehensive parking what?
Parking
Study.
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 Yeah.
Is that for downtown area, you mean?
Mhm,
Yeah.
Specifically downtown, yes.
Well, it is edging to, I think it's catching or at least it's catching my attention a little bit more as the years rolled by. I've always felt that having a parking issue, a parking problem is a good thing. Just because if you go to a city, a little town that doesn't have a parking problem, it's dead.
Well, except, and Kurt, you can maybe back me up on this because you probably have better statistics, but I have heard from the members of the co-op board that they can actually tell the amount of business they lose when their parking lot is full.
Well, there's a conventional wisdom estimate, and they're saying 10%. They could do another 10% if they had a big parking lot. But
I thought it was higher than that, but that's
Yeah.
interesting.
And like today, I see a truck pull in there, park 3 spots down from me, get a bicycle out, ride to the university.
Oh, God.
Right? I hadn't seen that before, so that's something else that's going on.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
yeah.
Probably was living at Identity Moscow.
Well, that makes your 2-hour thing that I didn't agree with start leaning that way now, because if that's going to start happening, that's going to hurt us. That's going to make it worse. I guess I'd seen them stop and walk to the sidewalk, not really thinking about it, but I just never seen someone grab their bike and just head to the.
So why would the 2-hour thing make it worse?
Well, I think that by the time you get to your class and you go to class, I would think it'd make it better for them not to do that.
Oh.
Because it takes more than 2
Yeah,
hours.
yeah. I was gonna say, how would it make it worse? Because they usually have several classes. Yeah, 2 hours would be too short to be able to do that.
And then
Yeah.
make sure somebody comes around there and does what they're
Right,
supposed to
right.
be doing.
Yeah, well, it does increase the capacity by 1/3 just by having that rollover. Maybe more, I don't know. I'm not very good at statistics, but I think that's what it does.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds good. Anyway, I guess, how do you feel about just picking one of these topics as the first and keeping this as a list to think about for a while, and so we can see what resources are out there? I mean, or maybe there's some we're just not interested in, or is that, or maybe, I mean, or would you prefer to just rank order them? I mean, you know.
I don't want to go through and rank order them tonight,
yep.
because it requires more thought.
I was just going to say that before you make a decision, too, you might think about talking to Jen Piffner, because I know she's worked with at least one other commission about doing strategic planning specifically for the commission. So that might be able to take some of these priorities and put them into some kind of plan. Just a thought.
So what's her title now?
She's the assistant city supervisor.
So that might be a good, we've talked about having various commission, the chair people come in, but having somebody in Jen's position, right, as a kind of an overview. Typically, we call in, you know, we've used less occasionally, but oftentimes we have a little bias for inviting somebody, and then it makes it a little tricky to have it just a pleasant conversation. And we could do better maybe with, we could include some of the city
So for
staff
this,
people in one of these events too,
Right.
as well as commission.
right. So if we were looking at the subdivision ordinance, say that's one of our priorities, because we're going to be working on that. What other commissions line up with that?
Well, I mean, I think
Or
you-
what- or
I think
city
you're gonna
personnel.
have, Transportation Commission, because the roadways
Right,
in
okay.
play with that.
Yeah.
Pathways.
Okay.
Those relate to that.
Yeah, so
Parks-
that could be a really rich
you know,
discussion.
Parks and
Yeah.
Rec, I mean,
Yeah.
the parkland dedication requirements are in our subdivision ordinance.
Okay, so we might be working on it in, we're talking about quarterly, but all of a sudden I'm putting it in that.
Well, but, that, I think this is gonna evolve a little
Yeah.
bit, but
Yeah.
maybe it would be worthwhile you and I meeting with Jen and then bringing that back to the commission at the next meeting and then make a final decision based on,
Right.
it's just, it's a thought.
Okay,
And I want to tap into where you're going to, or maybe. The city does have a strategic plan, and they do have major challenge areas identified, and it would probably be useful if we had some concept.
If we knew what
of
they are,
What
yeah.
that is, so that we're working in parallel
Right,
with them
right.
instead of being here in the dark.
right, because we aren't really doing strategic planning right now.
No.
What we're really doing is just trying to set some goals for our continuing education, because we decided to limit it to just that as a discussion, but it would be helpful to know what we should continue our education on,
Yeah.
to know what the where the
That's a very
strategic
reasonable
plan.
request.
What's that?
Very reasonable request.
Yeah, so, anyway, so that's good.
And as well as, I guess, the university is our heartbeat by and large. And so thinking about some people on campus to include in that group as well. I mean, I think right at the moment, there's just a little bit of, depending on what the topic is. I mean, if we're going to talk about parking, we should certainly get one of the insider directors of parking on campus to be
Yeah,
part of that.
Our former assistant planner,
Rebecca
who's
Couch.
Rebecca Couch, yeah. Yeah, that would be
She
good.
used to work for the city.
Yeah, she worked for the city, she worked for the university, then she worked for the city, then when she went back to the university. Must have been better benefits. No, I'm just kidding.
And then against each other.
Well, do you have anything you want
No,
to add?
I think this is great to get the thought
Yeah,
process moving and maybe do just a little bit of interim work and bring it back. I mean, this is a start to something that I think is going to evolve very nicely.
I agree.
So I kind of do like the idea of maybe before we make any final decisions, getting with Jen and getting that coordinated, making sure,
Yeah.
work at doing that. And then
right,
bring back, not a decision, but bring back a suggestion to the commission, perhaps at the next meeting or the one after that,
Right.
depending on how quickly we get this going, and then get buy-in from the commission on, okay, this is gonna be our first topic, and this is how we're gonna approach it. I don't know, I just a thought.
sounds good.
Yeah, and stay flexible, because 8 months down the road, something may come up that we haven't even thought of.
Sure.
Yeah, that's why, in a way, I think it's good to have this reserve list that we can, draw, it's like a library of topics, I think, to think of it that way, and we figure out which ones are the most relevant based on.
So Kurt, did you want me to mark any particular ones up here?
No, I was just thinking that we could individually go up just on our way out and do a quick 4 hash marks, but I think the plan going forward is better, yeah.
In some ways, another useful way is to take these topics and write a paragraph or a more descriptive thing than just say, well, what are we talking about when we're talking about parking, or when we're talking about affordable housing, how there's different ways of looking at it. And are we talking about that tiny house? Are we talking about, I've said for years that I think mobile homes, that's how Idaho handles
Affordable
poverty
housing,
in our city. If you think of living in the New York metro area where there are 20 million people, most people in that area have never seen a mobile home. Never seen one. I mean, they don't exist. You either have some way to help you subsidize your apartment, or, you know, there's no land. Here, a guy on a very limited budget can go 20 miles out of town and find a way to survive. And I think that's been, I don't know, I used to make a lot of fun of it, and I don't do that anymore, because in my mind, that's a relief valve for.
Well, I
a
mean,
state
but they
like ours,
develop in locate, I mean, when you look at Syringa, the tragedy there is if you drive out Robinson Lake Road, you'd see people walking all the way into town because they have no other means of transportation to get
Well,
back
that's
and
a
forth.
particularly
Yeah,
noxious.
I know,
deal.
but it is a model of being out of town and
Right.
out of
It
an
is.
alternative transportation network.
Most of the
And-
people I'm thinking about are just a mobile
Right.
home somewhere, 1, 2, 3. You can
Right.
deal with the sewage issue with one
Right.
mobile home.
Right.
Once you get 50 mobile homes, you better be on city
Yeah.
services or you're in serious trouble. And therein was the issue with
Right,
Syringa.
Well,
Well, what excitement.
and if
here.
anybody else has anything else to add, say it now or forever hold our peace.
Yeah, and if you have any idea, if you want to set our mission, vision, goals, objectives,
Yeah, we'll
I'm being facetious.
reveal an entire strategic plan right on the spot here. Okay. Thank you.
Water's a big issue
topic?
as a topic. It's not up there. The PBAC and aquifer and all that stuff is going on. And, you know, as we grow, we consume more water, and so that would be something that I think.
And it's possible that maybe we have somebody from the Sustainability Commission and maybe some people from the Water Summit organization, but weave it within a broader and almost environmental impact kind of discussion, or,
You know, maybe,
yeah.
Wendy, we should just, in the next several months, invite, let's say, 3 different commission leaders, commission chairs in, and let them talk to us, and it might stimulate
Right.
where we should be going,
Right.
rather than to just try to act like we're so smart right
well,
now.
and I think that it may inform us that we need to go back into the comprehensive plan and put in some strategies for some of the aspirations in a more enriched way. I don't know.
If we could get some symbiotic relationship with a couple other, I mean, transportation, certainly,
Sustainable.
sustainable ability group. There's several that we should talk to,
Right.
really.
And they all do annual reports, and Sustainable Environment just did theirs.
Right, okay, yeah. So if we start with the subdivision and invite related commissions around that I think it's gonna take more than one session.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, do you wanna invite them all at the table at the same time or separately? Separately, yeah. I mean, you know, because we could maybe regularly count on maybe a half hour, 45 minutes at the end of the meeting, what time is it now, 8:30? Well, we had such a short agenda tonight, we zipped through it, so I don't want to keep people here till
Right,
midnight.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
if you have a guest that's doing a presentation, you don't put them at the end, make them sit through everything.
Well, if we have a hearing, then we can't
Then you
do
can't
it.
say.
Right.
But if we don't have a hearing, we could let the person that we invite in take the first half hour
Right, right.
to
Right.
give us a
Although it's an
insight.
opportunity to educate the public if we have it before the, before the hearing.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, anyway. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rob,
this
for
was,
doing the.
Very good.
Really
Yeah.
appreciate everybody's input.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can thank Rob for jolting me into not giving up the ghost on shared.
Everything that you can't read because you can't play, right?